Someone asked me to talk a little bit about why Catholics and other mainline Christians observe Sunday as the Sabbath, and other people choose to continue to honor the Sabbath, Saturday, as the Sabbath, such as Seventh-day Adventists, Seventh-day Nazarenes, of course, Jewish people. And as much as I tried to find some very specific answers to that question, I flunked. But what I want to do for a moment is reflect on the first chapter of Genesis, in which it states that God created in 6 days. And if I've got things figured out at all, he started on Sunday and ended up on Friday. And the seventh day, the day of rest, would have been, I guess, what we call the Sabbath. Now, some people, of course, do their best to take that first chapter literally, which gets us into the predicament of how could God create light and darkness on day 1, but there was no sun, moon, and stars until day 4. And of course, that leads us to say that that first chapter of Genesis was probably composed around 600 years before the birth of Jesus. It was composed in a time when people were in exile, far from their homeland, far from ability to share and express and live their faith the way they had wanted to. And so that chapter was really written as a creative device to help people reflect on what was most important. And living in the midst of pagan people who believed in all sorts of gods, the wisdom that these people heard from the Holy Spirit, that the writer took and put into the words of our first chapter in the Bible, reflects so many wonderful truths, and we don't have to get caught up with, well, how do we explain that all this took place in 6 days, or how do we explain sun, moon, and stars on day 1, and light and darkness on day 1, sun, moon, and stars on day 4. One of the main truths revealed in the first chapter of Genesis is that the one God, Creator, Word, and Holy Spirit, were all present in that first verse or two, in how the Spirit blew above the waters, over the waters, and the Creator God in union with the Word brought order out of chaos. What a wonderful thing for people who are in exile to reflect on, that God is quite capable of bringing order out of the chaos we live in. So, again, God of one who brings order out of chaos. Secondly, that everything that was created, that everything that's in that first chapter of Genesis came about peacefully and intentionally. One of the other front-running myths from the pagan people, not that they were so bad, because they contained many truths as well, but they, to some degree, saw creation coming to be as gods would fight with one another. And so, chapter 1, no violence, everything by the will of God, everything intended, everything was consciously prepared. And thirdly, that God is revealed as one who will always make space, prepare us for how we can continue to experience the goodness of God. And so the first days of creation are days of separation, of space making. And so day 1, light from darkness. Day 2, the higher water from the lower water. Day 3, land and water. And of course, in day 4, 5, and 6, those spaces were filled in. And so that we can reflect on how, in cooperation with God, we today continue to make space for God being present to us, especially as we struggle with all of the difficulties that we face in these days of pandemic and economic fluttering and all the rest. The other point that I think is worth something, maybe not much, is if we're going to take the first chapter of Genesis literally, does that mean we're obligated to work 6 days of the week? And of course we say, no, that's up to us to determine how many days of the week we're going to work. And of course, I forgot one other very important point, and of course this is that regardless of what is going on in our world, we are called to imitate God and rest. And it wasn't because God was tired after 6 days of creation. That's certainly a goofy image of God. But that it's a teaching moment, that first chapter of Genesis, that indeed in order to be able to create the space we need in order to let God continue to fill us and renew his presence within us, we need to have time to rest, time to breathe, and to provide opportunities in which we can reflect on how we have allowed God to fill us with God's many blessings. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it's limited to one day of rest. Hopefully we can incorporate times of rest and reflection in every day of the week. So to get back to the question, as you can tell, I didn't answer it, which is probably much my style. But I'm in good company because Jesus rarely answered any question directly. So, but again, if people want to choose to interpret things literally, it's just going to limit, and if not to some degree, destroy the beauty and the truth, the goodness that is revealed throughout the scriptures, but particularly in that first chapter that is so rich for our reflection. And of course, well, how can we go wrong as we reflect on how we have been created in the image of God?